Hello, my name is Amelia. The story I'm about to tell is not to seek sympathy, but to share a lesson that I have paid for with my own happiness, my family, and the peace of mind I once had. This is a story of mistakes, pain, regret, and the irreversible consequences of actions. It's a story that, to this day, is forever engraved in my heart, and I have to live with it every single day. My name is Amelia. I'm 30 years old, and I live in Virginia Beach, a charming coastal city in the United States that has been my home for most of my life. For me, Virginia Beach is not just a place. It's a place full of memories that shape who I am. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so I can continue bringing you more fascinating true stories like this one. And don't forget to watch this video till the end and like the video because this story is going to be incredibly interesting. Please hit the like button to show your support. I still remember the afternoons from my childhood, sitting quietly on the warm sand, listening to the soothing sound of the waves crashing against the shore, gazing at the endless blue sky that seemed to stretch infinitely above me. It felt like I could breathe in the very air of serenity, as if every gust of wind and every wave crashing against the rocks was speaking to me in a language only my soul could understand. The ocean, with its beauty, mystery, and vastness, became an integral part of my being. It was the backdrop of my childhood, nurturing my love for the sea and the stories it holds from an early age. I found myself fascinated by the life that surrounded the beach, the bustling streets filled with tourists, the excited chatter of people from different places sharing their stories from the corners of the world. This constant movement ignited a sense of curiosity within me. I wanted to hear more, see more, and understand more. I dreamed of becoming a guide, someone who could not only share the beauty of my hometown, also the history and culture of the places I loved. I envisioned myself taking people on a journey, showing them the world through my eyes, sharing the passion that I had for the places I held dear. Becoming a tour guide wasn't an easy path. When I graduated from high school, I was determined to make my dreams a reality, but the road ahead was anything but smooth. I had no silver spoon in my mouth, no one to help me. I worked long, exhausting hours in part-time jobs, sacrificing my nights and weekends to save up for the courses I needed to take in order to fulfill my dream. The financial strain was overwhelming, but I was committed. After years of hard work and effort, 7 years ago, my dream finally came true. I officially became a tour guide. It wasn't just a job to me, it was a calling. Not only did it provide me with an income, but it also fulfilled my passion for sharing the beauty of the world. And I was doing something I loved. Looking back, I realized how much I've grown not just in age, but in my ability to push through challenges and setbacks. Virginia Beach had given me the foundation, and I did the rest. I turned my passion into a meaningful career, and I was proud of what I had accomplished. But everything changed the day Carlos walked into my life. He was a tall, elegant, confident man from Spain with the kind of charm that would stop anyone in their tracks. He came to Virginia Beach for a short trip, bringing with him the warmth of the Mediterranean. It was during one of my tours that we first met. His eyes lit up as I spoke about the rich history of the region, and I could sense that he was truly interested in what I had to say. His questions weren't just superficial. They were thoughtful, and there was something about his curiosity that made me want to continue the conversation. What started as small talk soon turned into deep, meaningful discussions. Carlos had a way of making me feel special, like I was the only person in the world. His words were like music to my ears, and there was an undeniable connection between us. He spoke often about his hometown in Spain, sharing stories about the culture and the people there. I, in turn, shared my own memories with him, my love for Virginia Beach, the ocean, and my childhood by the sea. It didn't take long before I realized that we had something strong between us, a bond that went beyond cultural differences and distance. We were connected in a way that I couldn't explain. After a year filled with romantic moments and unforgettable memories, Carlos proposed to me one warm afternoon when the sun was setting, painting the beach in beautiful shades of red and gold. The small ring on his hand sparkled in the evening light, but it was his eyes that shone brighter. There was something in his gaze that told me he was ready to spend the rest of his life with me. I said yes, and we began our journey together. We moved into a small, cozy house near the beach, where the sound of the waves became our constant companion. Every night, we'd sit together, laughing, talking, and simply enjoying each other's company. It was the kind of life I had always dreamed of, a life full of love, warmth, and happiness. And then the greatest joy of all came into our lives when our daughter, Sophia, was born. She had the most beautiful brown eyes, just like Carlos. The moment she was born, I cried not from pain, but from the overwhelming emotion of it all. She was the living proof of our love, a miracle that I never thought I deserved, and I promised myself that I would cherish her every single day. Carlos began working as a manager at a prestigious hotel in the city, and his career quickly took off. He was an exceptional leader, and his ability to connect with people earned him the respect of everyone around him. As for me, although my life became busier with a newborn, I continued my work as a tour guide. It wasn't just a job, it was my passion. Every day, I felt the joy of sharing the beauty of the sea with the tourists. But most of all, I cherished coming home to Carlos and Sophia, where laughter and love awaited me. For a time, everything seemed perfect. We were living the life we had always dreamed of, and I believed that nothing could ruin it. But life has a way of changing, and it didn't take long before the reality of marriage set in. After the initial excitement of our union faded, we found ourselves caught up in the demands of work, responsibilities, and the constant pressure of daily life. Carlos became more and more absorbed in his work. His long business trips and constant meetings left little time for us. Meanwhile, I found myself juggling a tight tour schedule and the demands of motherhood. We were like two planets orbiting in separate orbits, slowly drifting apart without even realizing it. At first, I tried to hold on to the belief that it was just a phase, that everything would get better eventually, but soon, dinners alone in front of the TV and waking up in an empty room without a greeting became the new normal. Our conversations became sporadic, filled with polite questions and vague plans that neither of us had time to follow through on. There were nights when I would sit in the darkness of our home, listening to the sound of the waves outside the window. The sound that once brought me peace now deepened my loneliness. The house that I once called home now felt like an empty shell, devoid of the emotions and connections that had once defined it. I felt lost, disconnected from the love I thought would last forever. The emptiness I felt grew larger every day, gnawing at me like a monster that wouldn't let go. And then, in a moment of weakness, I made a choice that would change everything. It was a fleeting decision, but its consequences were like crashing waves, tearing apart everything that was once important to me. I never imagined that a stranger, someone completely outside my world, would disrupt my life in such a dramatic way. Julian came into my life one summer afternoon when I was guiding a group of tourists on a tour of the beach near my house. Julian was tall, strong, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to capture the essence of the sea itself. He didn't stand out in a flashy way, but there was a calmness about him, a warm smile that drew me in. At first, we exchanged small talk, but there was something different about him. He wasn't just interested in my stories. He responded with such thoughtfulness that I couldn't help but be captivated. We talked about the sea, about life in Virginia, and about his home country, France. Julian's words had a magical quality, stirring something deep within me, a sense of familiarity that I couldn't place. Our encounters became more frequent, with Julian finding excuses to stay after the tour and ask about little things, like where to find a good coffee shop or a quiet beach path. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he invited me to sit on the beach and watch the sunset. I couldn't say no. We sat in silence, watching the sky change from gold to red, feeling the soft sea breeze against our skin. Inside, a fire began to burn, something I couldn't ignore as the days went by. Julian became the highlight of my routine. We didn't just talk on the beach. We explored the city together, seeing familiar places through his eyes. There was a sense of freedom and impetuousness in those moments, a feeling that I hadn't experienced in years. When I was with Julian, I forgot everything, forgot the loneliness of my empty home, the growing distance between Carlos and me, and the parts of myself that I had buried. It didn't stay innocent for long. One evening, as the waves gently lapped the shore, Julian touched my hand. That simple touch ignited something in me, burning away any rational thought. He pulled me closer, and before I could react, his lips were on mine. The kiss was intense, as if he had been waiting his whole life to do it. In that moment, all my boundaries collapsed, and I knew I was doing something wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. I threw myself into his arms. The days that followed were a mix of guilt and longing. Julian brought me excitement, something I had been missing in my marriage, but with every moment I spent with him, the weight of my betrayal grew heavier. The image of Carlos, my devoted husband, and the father of our daughter, kept haunting me. I tried to justify my actions, telling myself that I was simply seeking what had been lost in my marriage: affection, connection, and the feeling of being loved. But deep down, I knew there was no excuse for what I was doing. Julian was not the answer to my problems. He was a storm that swept through my life, leaving only destruction in its wake. Every time I said goodbye to Julian after our encounters, a part of me felt torn. I wanted to stop, but I didn't have the strength. Julian was like an addiction, something I couldn't quit even though I knew it was wrong. He was gentle, patient, and made me feel special, but I knew that this couldn't last. It was just a fleeting escape, and soon I would have to face the consequences of my actions. The guilt intensified every time I saw Sophia. Her innocent eyes, so much like Carlos's, looked at me with unwavering trust. I wondered if she would ever forgive me if she knew the truth. One day, would Carlos, the man I had promised to love for life, be able to forgive me for betraying him? The questions gnawed at me, making me realize that no amount of passion from Julian could ever justify the destruction I had caused. I started avoiding Julian, but it wasn't easy. He texted, called, and found ways to meet me. Every time I saw his name on my phone, my heart would race with a mix of fear and desire. I knew I needed to end it, but I didn't have the courage to say goodbye. Julian wasn't a bad person. He just came into my life at the wrong time, when I was weak and vulnerable. I was the one who allowed this to happen, and I was the one who had to face the consequences. One evening, when Julian asked to meet again, I knew I had to make a final decision. As the sun set and the sky turned a soft shade of pink, I looked into his eyes, the same eyes that had once made me fall for him. But now those eyes only made me feel pain. I told him we couldn't continue. Julian was silent, his eyes filled with confusion, but then his expression hardened. He didn't get angry or shout. Instead, he asked me a question that tore me apart. Are you happy? That question broke me. I couldn't answer him because deep down, I knew the answer. Julian left that night, taking with him feelings I would never forget. But I knew that to save my marriage and protect what was most important in my life, I had to let go of him, even though it broke my heart. It was the only thing I could do, not just for Carlos and Sophia, but for myself. When I found out I was pregnant, my emotions were a whirlwind. The news should have been joyous, a miracle in the midst of my complicated, tumultuous feelings. Yet, I felt consumed by fear, doubt, and confusion. I wasn't sure who the father was: Carlos, my husband, the man I had promised to be faithful to, or Julian, the man who had ignited a spark within me that I had long forgotten. My mind raced as I tried to piece together the truth. Could it be Carlos? Or was it the passionate moments I had shared with Julian? I felt trapped in my own skin. I had no idea how I was going to tell Carlos or if I would ever have the strength to confess. What if he rejected me? What if he couldn't forgive me? The fear of facing the consequences of my actions paralyzed me. The guilt ate away at me, and I found it impossible to enjoy the simple joys of pregnancy, like feeling the baby move for the first time, knowing that my life had become a tangled mess of lies. The days passed slowly. I could feel the weight of the secret pressing down on me. Every time Carlos smiled at me or put his hand on my belly, feeling the baby's first kick, I felt a sharp pang of guilt. He had no idea about the affair. He didn't know that I had betrayed him, and I couldn't bear the thought of hurting him. But every time I looked into his eyes, I felt the suffocating weight of my own dishonesty. 9 months of pregnancy felt like a lifetime. I kept telling myself that everything would be fine, that I would somehow make things right. But I knew deep down that the day the baby was born, the truth would come to light. And when that day came, I didn't know if I'd be able to live with the consequences. The day my son, Luca, was born, the world seemed to stand still. It was a rainy morning, and I could feel the heaviness in the air. When the doctor placed the baby in my arms, a feeling of both joy and confusion overwhelmed me. I looked down at my son's tiny face, his dark brown skin, and his deep black eyes. It was then that I realized the truth was undeniable. Luca looked exactly like Julian, the features, the eyes, everything. There was no hiding it. I could feel the walls closing in on me. The moment Carlos walked into the room and saw his son, the look on his face shifted. His smile froze, and his eyes stopped at Luca's skin. There was no mistaking the change in his demeanor. He turned his gaze to me, and I saw the doubt in his eyes. The silence in the room was suffocating. I could feel his confusion, his hurt, and his anger building up inside him, but he didn't say a word. He just stood there, trying to process everything without asking me a single question. My heart shattered. I knew the truth couldn't be hidden anymore. The air in the room felt thick with tension, and every breath I took seemed to make the guilt more unbearable. Carlos didn't say anything. He just stared at Luca, and the silence between us grew louder with each passing second. The days that followed were filled with tension. Carlos hardly spoke to me. His silence was more frightening than any words could have been. Every time he held Luca, there was a look of worrying in his eyes, a look of doubt that he couldn't hide. I knew that the suspicion in his heart was growing stronger with each passing day, but I couldn't find the courage to tell him the truth. I was afraid of what would happen if I did. I was afraid of losing him, of losing my family. And most of all, I was terrified of facing the consequences of what I had done. Then the day of Luca's full month celebration came. We had invited family and friends over to celebrate, but Carlos was distant. He didn't seem to enjoy the celebration. He sat quietly in the corner, his eyes never leaving the baby. It was as if he was trying to piece together the puzzle of our lives, trying to find the answer to the question that had been haunting him. After the guests left, Carlos approached me. His voice was calm, but each word he spoke pierced through me like a knife. "We need to do a DNA test," he said. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been holding my breath for so long, trying to keep everything hidden, but now there was no denying the truth. I couldn't lie anymore. I couldn't pretend anymore. Tears welled up in my eyes as I lowered my head in shame. I had no strength left to deny the truth. I admitted everything. I told him about Julian, about the affair, about the lies I had told him. The words came tumbling out, choked by sobs and regret. But even as I confessed, I couldn't bring myself to look him in the eye. The shame was too overwhelming. Carlos didn't yell. He didn't scream. He didn't even seem angry. He just stood there, silent, as if he were trying to absorb the shock of what I had just said. His silence was worse than any criticism or anger could have been. It made me feel small and insignificant. That night, Carlos didn't sleep. I could hear him moving around the house, packing his things in silence. I sat in the dark, holding our son, unable to find the words to say. I wanted to beg him to stay, to tell him I was sorry, but I knew I had no right to ask that. Carlos had given me everything: love, trust, a family, and I had destroyed it all with my own actions. When he was done packing, he turned to me one last time. His voice was hoarse as he said, "I'm going back to Spain. I'll take Sophia with me. You live with your choice." Those words felt like a punch to the gut. I wanted to stop him, to beg him to stay, but I knew it was too late. I had ruined everything. Carlos had been the best husband, and I had thrown it all away for a moment of weakness. As he walked out the door, I saw Sophia running after him, her small figure appearing in the doorway. She looked at me, confusion and sadness in her eyes, and asked, "Aren't you coming with us, Mom?" Her words hit me like a dagger, my own daughter asking me why I wasn't going with her, why I wasn't going to fix what I had broken. I shook my head, unable to speak. Tears streamed down my face as I watched Carlos bend down to pick up Sophia and walk out of the door, leaving me behind. The sound of the door closing echoed through the house, a reminder of everything I had lost. The house, once filled with laughter and love, was now empty. It was just me and Lucas, and the cold walls that surrounded us seemed to whisper reminders of all the mistakes I had made. The waves outside, which once brought me peace, now felt like a constant reproach. In the days after Carlos left, I felt lost. I tried to focus on my son, to love and care for him, but the weight of my guilt never left me. Lucas was too young to understand what had happened. He didn't know that he was born out of a mistake, that his mother had traded her family for moments of passion. But every time I looked into his eyes, I felt the pain of my betrayal. I wondered if I could ever make up for the damage I had done. I wondered if my love for Lucas would ever be enough to atone for the mistakes I had made. There were nights when I lay awake in bed, staring out at the moonlit sea, wondering if I could ever forgive myself. The beach house had become an emotional prison, a place where I was forced to confront the consequences of my actions. But at the same time, it was the only place I had left, a place where I had to find the strength to rise again, not just for myself, but for my son, who was growing up every day, carrying both my mistakes and my hopes. Life often puts us in difficult situations where fleeting emotions lead to life-altering decisions. But remember, every action has consequences, and sometimes the price to pay is higher than we could have ever imagined. Before you let your emotions overwhelm your thoughts, stop and think about what truly matters in life: your family, the people who love you, and yourself. Don't let moments of weakness destroy what you've built. More importantly, learn to face your mistakes. Only when you acknowledge your wrongs and take responsibility for them can you begin the journey of redemption. Forgiveness, whether from others or yourself, is the only path to healing. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope you've learned from my mistakes. Life is never perfect, but we can make it better by appreciating what we have. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more meaningful stories. Hit the notification bell to stay updated on new stories. See you in the next one.